Good evening and welcome to Talk Gnosis. I'm Bishop Lainey Peterson. My normal co-host, Bishop Ken Canterbury, can't be with us tonight, but our producer, Brother Jonathan Stewart, has decided to join us. Thank you very much, brother.
Hello, everybody.
Hello, and I want to welcome, we have a very special guest this evening. Mr. Tim Freke is the author of The Jesus Mysteries, which was an Amazon top 6 bestseller and a UK Daily Telegraph Book of the Year. Tim has an honors degree in philosophy and is an internationally respected authority on world spirituality, so we're really excited to have him with us today. And he is the author of over 30 books, which as a Ralph, I am entirely impressed. Thank you so much for joining us. Welcome.
It's a real pleasure to be with you.
Thank you so much. And so we're just going to get right into it. Can you talk a little bit about the connection between the Gnostics and ancient Egypt?
Yeah, I mean the book you mentioned, which was our kind of big bestseller that I wrote with Peter Gandy, the thesis of that book, which was so controversial, and it kind of started off something which I think has grown in momentum in the years since, was to suggest that the Jesus story that we all know so well is a parable. That it's like, the easiest way that I find to put this across is to say that, in the Jesus story, there are lots of parables, like the parable, say, of the Good Samaritan. But we don't go looking for a real Good Samaritan because we realize it's a teaching story. In the same way, the whole of the Jesus story, I have come to believe, is a teaching story. It's a Gnostic teaching story developed by Gnostics, probably in Egypt, most likely in Alexandria. And they've to create a allegory of the journey, the initiatory journey to Gnosis. And the mythos that they drew on was the one which was around them in the ancient world, which was this pagan mythology, which was Greco-Egyptian mythology of Dionysus and Osiris and Mithras and Adonis and all these other dying and resurrecting godmen. So I think the Jesus story is essentially a Gnostic creation. Its hero, Joshua or Jesus, is a Jewish version of a pagan myth. And the creators are doing it, I suspect, in Alexandria, in Egypt. And one of the reasons, I mean, just to kind of nail that a little bit, because I've said a lot of things which for some people will be pretty outrageous, is the... in just outside of Alexandria, we know there's groups like the Therapeutai, who are Pythagoreans and Jews.
Right.
So they're practicing their own Gnostic mysteries of Moses, and they're also known as Pythagoreans. So they're pagan Jews. And when you look at the Jesus story, it's essentially a Jewish version of a pagan myth. And I think it's probably put together in Alexandria or somewhere like that. Clearly, from the geography, whoever's added the geography to the story doesn't know Palestine very well. It's not very well done. So it's done by someone who's trying to gesture towards Palestine rather than being on the ground there. So so I would say I think it's Egyptian. The whole thing.
Now, this does beg a very important question. Do you believe that there was a historical Jesus, or do you believe that the person of Joshua was a part of the myth, a creation of the myth?
Great question. I mean, when we started doing our research, I went with what was a much more common idea, which was there is a real Jesus or Joshua or whatever he was called, and his real story has been overlaid later by these pagan myths, in a bit like Christmas, which is a festival of the solstice, has been laid on as his birthday, and so forth and so forth. Having gone right into it and found that every single element, from virgin birth, 12 disciples, the message, right down to crucifixion and resurrection, the bread and the wine, everything is there in pagan mythology. And so you have to go, what's left? And then when you turn to, I mean, just as an aside, I mean, on our book, which I brought out especially for you, this is I don't know if you can see that, but there's a figure on there of a crucified figure. And this isn't Jesus. This is the pagan dying and resurrecting God-man being crucified. So you can see that so I'm left with, well, by Occam's razor, the principle in philosophy of if you don't need something, why put it in? We don't look for a real Osiris. We don't look for a real Dionysus. We don't look for a real Mithras or Adonis or Serapis, and they're all the same figure. So I have ended up feeling like, well, the only thing which would persuade me is if I could find some really compelling evidence for an historical man. And what is astonishing to those, I think, who haven't gone into it in any depth is there is none at all. Nothing. Absolutely nothing. And the only things that are in existence are obvious forgeries. For instance, the passage in the Jewish historian Josephus, which was known to be a crude forgery 400 years ago. So people are making this stuff up because there is we don't have any. We don't have any. So my own personal, I don't know, it's 2,000 years ago, but my strong suspicion is that we are just dealing with a myth. And actually, here's the real thing for me. It's kind of liberating. I find it immensely liberating because the myth is so deep. You're right.
Yes, it is.
And the thing with what I call literalism, for people who really believe and hang on to a real Jesus, I really understand why you do that. Because you have a personal relationship with Jesus. The funny thing is, that's more Gnostic than it is literalist. Because I feel like the Gnostic approach is you have a relationship with Jesus who represents, as Joseph Campbell would say, a mask of God. It's a way that you can reach to the one that has no face. And that represents your own deep self. But if you have a real Jesus, you have to face the fact that your real Jesus is probably wrong. Because it can't all be right. He can't be a revolutionary and a avatar or a Buddha or a fundamentalist Jesus or a nice Quaker Jesus or one of the, probably if we have a real Jesus, it's a fantasy Jesus anyway. If there's something tragic about that, if there is a real man, because it means you're relating to a fantasy that you're thinking is real. But once you get, a projection. But once you get, that's the whole point. The whole point is that you have your own Jesus. Then that works just fine. And I find that, which is a Gnostic approach, far more attractive.
I think that's absolutely beautiful. Sometimes we have on the show, I think it was Father Tony, actually, who brought this topic up one evening, and he asked Bishop Ken, my co-host, and I, if would we bail on the church if Jesus was proven to be a myth? And we both said no. This is for us there's far more to this than the historical person. So
one of the things I love about the Gnostics so much, but we certainly get that in their text, where Jesus is one beautiful text where Jesus appears as a baby, then an old man, and then a youth, and then there's this lovely line which says, "And some saw him and realized they were seeing their own self." And there you're just like, whoa, that's it. That's it. When you go to the fundamentalist churches, you get this, the gospel, the good news. And for them, the good news is this belief in history. What I love about the Gnostics is one of the things which they're attacked for is that for them, the good news, the gospel, is the gnosis.
Yes.
The good news is you can experience gnosis of God. You can know who you are. You can experience agape. Yes. This is the good news. And the Jesus story is a vehicle to that.
It absolutely is. And that's wonderful. Thank you. Brother Jonathan, do you have any questions to ask Mr. Freke?
I do. Tim, what is the mystery experience and how does it connect to the ancient Gnostics?
Well, having done this work, I did about 3 or 4 books on Gnosticism, which kind of was unexpected for me, in all honesty, Jonathan. I've written on all the world's traditions, and then the Gnostics just took hold, and my life changed with them. But where it left me personally on my own journey was the thing which, a bit like the original Gnostics, for me, it's the gnosis. That's what matters. Sharing the oneness, sharing what I call the big love, that all-encompassing love. So what I've looked to do in my later work over the last 10 years, which is culminated in my book called The Mystery Experience, is take the essence of the ancient mysteries, whether they be the pagan mysteries or the Jesus mysteries, and put them in a way that we can get now. So, I love the fact we have all these two different traditions, but for me personally, I want to find a way that we can dive into this experience of knowing. And that's what I share with people. And I'm just off to Japan, and then I'm going to Vegas, and I'm having them here, and it's like, and people from all cultures, all ages, all types come together, and just about everyone, just gets it. And when you get it, you just know, and you can't miss it, because there's this love. The love is so big and so transformative. So that's my passion, really, to take this gnosis out there, reshape it for today, and share it with as many people as I can while I can.
I think that's a wonderful calling and mission to have. Absolutely. So thank you.
I feel very privileged. I do.
Yes, it's wonderful. Now, there is something that I want to bring up, and it's kind of a hot button topic today. Who is the lost goddess? Where did she come from, and what is her connection to Jesus?
Well, one of the things which was a revelation to me, and I think to many people who don't know this area, was that for the what I would call the original Christians, the Gnostics, it's not just the figure of the God-man, it's the figure of the goddess. So that the mythology of Jesus only makes sense actually when it's brought together with the mythology of the goddess, who has many names. Sophia is one of the most common, but she's Zoe and all sorts. And her mythology, the Christian goddess, is an adaptation of the myth that we find in the pagan world, say with Demeter and Persephone. So there's a higher Sophia and a lower Sophia, which is, so you've got really you've got a quaternity. You've got father and mother and daughter and son. And what they're representing is what's happening now. It's pointing to a realization in the moment. So the father is the great mystery from which everything arises, has no form. It is the dreamer of the dream of life. The goddess is the dream. She's every color and shape and feeling, and she's everything. We're in her now. We are her.
Right.
And so that's soul. So psyche, or in the Greek, or soul, is goddess, and spirit, or pneuma, or nous, that's the essence, that's the male, and that's God. So you've got the dreamer and the dream, and then within the dream we're fragments of soul. We're fragments of the dream. I'm having this unique dream here around Tim. You're having your unique dream, and Lainey, you're having your unique dream. But it's all part of one dream. So that's the world soul. That's the cosmic soul. That's the goddess herself. And we are a fragment of that on this journey of realization. And in each one of us, there is a point of consciousness, an I, which is aware of this. And that's the sun. That's the Christ, which is the same as what the Buddhists will call the Buddha nature, or the Hindus call the Atman. That's and the whole of the Jesus myth is about how we can save the soul from being lost and bring it back to the Christ. So it's that once you, as you know, I'm sure it's so rich once you see what these teachings really are, and so different from certainly what I was told at Sunday school.
Yeah, I think you make a good point there. Very often what we're taught in Sunday school is that it's our job to know about God. So we study the scriptures and what's presented to us. But for us Gnostics, we oftentimes begin with self-knowledge, because learning about ourselves, and the reason why we do that is we recognize that we are going to project a whole lot if we don't have knowledge of ourselves. And if we can do that, it becomes a lot easier to know about God if we have some knowledge of how we operate and the games that we play and our blind spots and whatnot. So I love the way you put that. That's wonderful.
Yeah, absolutely perfect. One of the things which we brought out in the books, the Jesus Mysteries, and then Jesus and the Lost Goddess, and onwards, was that I could see that the Gnostic had this initiatory process through the psychic initiation that Paul talks about, to the pneumatic initiation. Pneumatic means spiritual. So it's a soul initiation and then a spiritual initiation. And I think the thread that goes through it, just as you've said, is the great commandment above Eleusis, know yourself.
Yes.
And Delphi, actually, that was the oracle at Delphi. And what you get is the first phase is know yourself as a separate person. Know your soul. Know who's Tim.
Mm-hmm.
And that is the level that most people come in on, and rightly. But once you've matured in that, then this whole other thing comes up, which goes, are you a person at all? Or are you God? Is it all God? And then you're into something else. You're suddenly into the spiritual initiation, which opens up this other depth to the whole process, where you discover, as Paul says, the Christ within you.
Yes.
The great revelation. My God, the Christ is within me. There's this incredible power and this love right at my very center. So that when I meet you, I'm both this unique human being called Tim, and at my depths, I'm the same as you. We're all one. And that separate and not separate is the love, I think. That's where the love is. It unites everything together. It
is. It is. And I appreciate so much you're sharing that with us. And we have guests on here, and we ourselves try to communicate this to our viewers and listeners. But as you point out, we're all part of that dream. And so when we can speak our truth in that way, it helps everybody to understand. People are going to understand differently. We are going to have to start winding up the show a little bit, but we will, of course, be taping our After Dark podcast. And for our viewers, you can catch that, the podcast on Stitcher and iTunes and at gnosticwisdom.net, probably Sunday night or Monday morning. But we'd like to know also for our viewers right now, what spiritual experiences have you had that have pointed you toward Gnosticism? Please feel free to share these on our Facebook group or in the comments section after this video. Now, Mr. Freke, where can we find you online?
Well, the great thing about having a crazy name like Freke is that you have to spell it right. It's spelled Freke. But if you put Tim Freke in, or you go to timfreke.com, you will find me, and you'll find my website, and there's a whole new website about to come online. If you sign up to my newsletter, I'll keep you informed. And there's loads of videos talking about both my work on Gnosticism, but also the work I've been doing since, and the mystery experience, and how you can have that experience for yourself, because that's really what I want to do. I want to share not just the historical information, but the living experience.
Absolutely. Now, you have some upcoming events, including one in one of my favorite cities, Vegas. So could you tell us about that?
Isn't that perfect? It's like, the paradox of that is perfect. Yes, I've been invited back to Vegas. I'm going to do a mystery experience retreat there in May, really soon, from the 8th to the 10th of May. Okay. And I'm really excited because I haven't been to the States for a while.
Oh, good.
And it's going to be great to come back and run a mystery experience. So, if people are listening thinking, I want to experience it. The reason I run these retreats is because people read all my books and started emailing me saying, I love your books, but I want to experience it. And whilst books, I hope, can do that sometimes, you can't beat being together. You can't. Yes. And it's such magic happens. So I'm doing that. I do them in the UK, in Japan. I've got one coming up in the UK here. I've got a one over the summer where people can come. I live in Glastonbury, which is a little Gnostic hotspot. It's a mystical, it's special little place. So, people come from all over the world to come to be part of that retreat because they get to be in Glastonbury as well. And I'm doing one more. There's so many. You should check out my website. But there's one other I feel like it would be really good to mention.
Okay.
Here, which is I'm doing a specifically Gnostic mystery experience, where I'm really going to root all this back into the Gnostic Christian tradition, and I'm doing that in November, and that's in Holland. So there's to choose from.
Very tempting. Very tempting. I'm going to check my frequent flyer miles.
That'd be great. You'd love it. It'd be so nice to have you there.
All right. Well, thank you so much. I do have one other bit of unrelated news. We've mentioned on the show before, folks, about the Independent Sacramental Conference. We've discussed the Independent Sacramental movement on the show before. There are going to be Gnostics, non-Gnostics, some traditionalists, probably some real progressives. But if you are a part of the Independent Sacramental movement or are interested in it, there's going to be a conference coming up in North Carolina, November 5th through the 8th, 2015. However, the registration deadline is June 30th, 2015. So if you are at all interested, you should check out the Independent Sacramental Conference on Facebook. Just do a search for it. You'll find it. Or you can go to isconference.weebly.com and you can find out more about it and get signed up. So if you're at all interested, I'm going to be there. So I think some of our previous guests are going to be there, so it should be a great time. And I'm looking forward to meeting folks there. Okay.
I'm going to try to go too. So I got my fingers crossed that I'll be able to make it.
All right. Okay, again, Mr. Freke, thank you so much for being on our show this week. It was a real pleasure to have you. And also, folks, coming up on Talk Gnosis, we're going to be doing a show next week on Lurianic Kabbalah with Dr. Sanford Dobb, which is, I think, going to be a fabulous show. So once again, as always, I very much appreciate everybody taking the time to watch and listen to this show, and we'll see you next week. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.
This has been a production of the Gnostic Wisdom Network. For more information about this and all of GWN's programming, please visit gnosticwisdom.net. The opinions expressed in this show do not necessarily reflect the opinions of GWN, the Apostolic Johannite Church, or any other organization. This has been released under a Creative Commons Attribution Share Alike 4.0 International License and is brought to you by the generous support of our patrons. To support our programs and become a patron, please visit patreon.com/Gnostic. That's patreon.com/GNOSTIC.